Welcome to the Sports Corner Podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 5, where we're going to be talking about the Southeastern Conference as we prepare for another exciting season of college football. We're also going to be talking about the University of Tennessee specifically and how they should look this season. We're going to give our Mount Rushmore of fried chicken sandwiches from around the fast food establishments. We're going to talk about a fake high school that somehow made it onto ESPN national television. All of that and more tonight on the Sports Corner Podcast. My name is Nick, joined as always by my good friend Steven. Steven, how are you tonight?
I'm fantastic. We get real football this week.
Teams
not coached by Scott Frost.
Yes, who would have thought that of the terrible football in Week 0 that the Nebraska Cornhuskers would be leading the charge for some of the worst that we saw. Pretty impressive. Before we get into college football, though, we're going to do things a little backwards. You know that we tend to do our Outside the Stadium segment where we look at something that's not necessarily a product on the field or something like that. We do that towards the end of the show, but tonight I want to start with it because, it does have a little crossover on the field intrigue, but also it's talking about college football. It's talking about high school football, whereas we almost always will talk about, college, especially in the NFL as well. So we definitely don't venture into high school sports nearly at all. But this one's worth mentioning because I stumbled across something on the Twitterverse this morning, Stephen, as I was awake and lying in bed and first getting up in the morning before, having to brush the teeth and get the child up and all this. And the headline that I saw was possibly fake ? High school apparently duped its way into playing on ESPN. So I'm pulling up this article for you here. This is from footballscoop.com. So be sure to, you can read this article for yourself and check it out if you so desire. But in essence, what happened is there was an online only prep school that agreed to play IMG Academy. Now, you know about IMG Academy, don't you, Stephen?
I do. They are one of the most productive as far as putting athletes in Division I schools in the country.
Yeah, they are all kinds of stacked. From what I read about them, of course, I've known that they were a stacked organization. They're known for putting quality content out. They're known for, if they blacklist your university, that is not a good thing because they're going to put out a lot of top-tier talent. They also play no home games, at least not this year. They're traveling to a dozen, probably not a dozen because I think they only play 11 games, but they're traveling to at least 8 different states to play these 11 games across the country, Texas, California. They've been in Ohio already. I think they're going to Pennsylvania. So they kind of travel around and play some of the top teams from various states to just show off the talent. And somehow, in this rotation of teams, they found themselves going head-to-head with a high school that apparently doesn't really exist in any physical sense of the word. And I love it because as this game's going on, of course, it is just hideously one-sided when you have this team that is really made up of star players going against a bunch of people who are not. And it was 30 to 3 or something goofy like that in the beginning of the second quarter. And about that time, the ESPN analysts couldn't ignore this anymore. And so they're like, we were told that this team had a lot of Division I talent, and that's not the case. And we are now worried for these kids' safety. I mean, the commentators literally say this on the air as they're spectating this disaster of a game.
So the team they played actually played Friday night as well.
Yeah, so they played Friday and then again on Sunday. So they played almost back-to-back games. That short of a stretch in football especially. It's just insane. So the school's name is Bishop Sycamore, and they claim to be from Columbus, Ohio. They went 0-6 last year.
They played IMG Academy last year.
So IMG knows what they're getting into, which is kind of weird. This is only their second season in existence, and they ended up by losing that game by a score of 56-6. according to what ESPN was told, they had a number of FBS prospects on its roster. But that's not the case. And I was trying to find the tweet. Here's, by the way, the
Bishop Sycamore told us they had a number of Division I prospects on their roster. To be frank, a lot of that.
I think we lost your mic there, Nick.
No, I'm playing an audio. I'm sorry, you probably can't hear it. Sorry.
And the databases of other recruiting services. So it's okay. If that's what you're telling us, fine. That's how we take it in. From what we've seen so far, this is not a fair fight. And
it's not a fair fight.
There's got to be a point now, Ludes, where you do worry about health and safety.
You do worry. And he goes on to say, I'll play this part real quick.
I already am worried about it.
He says, I already am worried about the player safety. So it's funny because, ESPN actually sources out to a different company called Paragon to make this slate of games, especially for the high school games that they air. So I guess the liability or the responsibility falls on them. But I'm just curious, how did they get duped in such a way? And here's the crazy thing. Now, I don't have this tweet pulled up. I went back to try and find it, and I can't find it. I don't know if it was deleted or what, but I didn't save the link, and now I can't find it. But the quarterback for this this fake college or this fake high school, in his Twitter bio, talks about being like this 3-star recruit for the class of like 2022. But when you like search his name, he's actually like a no-star recruit from a different state originally, from a different class. And when they searched back his Twitter history enough, they found him like tweeting about him like being a New Jersey boy in this other class, and he was like tweeting some of his stats and all that. So it's like he's now like lying on his Twitter profile about like his classification, his star ratings, like all of this. Like it's just blatant lies. And when you Google the address to the school, it's like a park in the middle of nowhere. It's like a park or something like that. Like it is just the craziest thing. So why do we bring this up? Because it's an insane story of how a non-existent high school somehow made its way onto ESPN to get beat by arguably one of the best teams in high school football. But this matters because it shows the lengths in which some people will do for high school sports, for getting the imagination that these kids can go and play college ball, make it to the NFL. And I look at that for two reasons. One, I think we put way too much emphasis on that. And then yet at the same time, I think for so many people, getting that college scholarship might be the only way out of a situation that they are in. And that's sad in and of itself. But what a crazy scenario for there to be somehow this huge... Like, it would be one thing if the story today was IMG Academy fooled into playing not real team. But how does it end up on ESPN's airwaves? That's just crazy to me.
Yeah, so they played last year. IMG Academy traveled to Columbus, Ohio to play Bishop Sycamore in a game that Bishop Sycamore went on to win 56-6. Or I'm sorry, the IMG Academy went on to win 56-6. So they knew what they were getting into in this game. I'm not sure how ESPN doesn't vet it better. But a look ahead at Bishop Sycamore's rest of their schedule, they played Duncanville out of Texas, who is a perennial power there. They played DeMatha, which is a very high-rated team out of Maryland, another one that produces a lot of Division I athletes. St. Thomas More out of Connecticut is another prep academy, produces a lot of talent. And then St. Francis Academy out of Maryland. So they play this national schedule against teams that all just are going to hammer them. I don't understand. I mean, I guess I get that you want to be noticed, but I mean, when you get so they lost Friday night, or they lost their first game 38-0, then they lost IMG Academy 58-0. So not sure what they're trying to prove here.
And why they would play back-to-back days like that. Like, what are you doing? You're not, I don't know. Something's fishy there. I'm excited to like get the 30 for 30 story on this in a couple of years. I
don't so much. I think ESPN's looking for somebody to blame because they got duped, and I think they're trying to throw their marketing company under the bus there. But
that's fair. I'm just saying, how do people not?
I mean, IMG Academy knew what was going on. So yeah, at the least, At the least, and here's the thing: if you are going to schedule a game, I assume you're going to do it even the most bare minimum of research that says, "Huh, they played last year and it was a drubbing. Maybe we shouldn't air this on national TV."
But yeah, I don't understand. No one did any research apparently, and I don't know. Like it's just a crazy thing for me. But anyway, that is just a side story. Want to throw it in there. It was too nuts not to discuss. But let's jump into the real content of tonight. Stephen, week 0 of the college football season is in the books. We're going to talk at least about one of those games here in a little bit. But we're about to gear into week 1. We have now broken down every other conference other than the Southeastern Conference. Out in the Pac-12, I think we kind of agreed that Oregon was looking to be probably our predicted winner out there. I think we were kind of consensus there. We were consensus on Clemson winning in the ACC. I believe we were consensus in Ohio State winning up in the Big Ten. In Oklahoma winning in the Big 12. And so now we get to see if we'll agree on the SEC or not. We've kind of agreed all along the way. So we're excited for that. So let's start. Let's begin by breaking down the SEC. What do we do first? We like to talk about the big games. All right, Steven, hit us with your first big game.
So I spared the big opener for you in case you wanted to cover it. So I focused more in conference, and I went with Florida, Georgia on October 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So this is dubbed the world's largest cocktail party.
Yes.
Not really sure why, but it is.
A lot of drinking.
But this game should once again decide who represents the East in the SEC championship game. Dan Mullen got the Gators there last year behind Kyle Trask. He's replacing that quarterback. Can he get back to that championship game, or does Georgia reclaim their stranglehold at the top of the East?
Yeah, that's for sure going to be a very critical game. Go ahead and give us your other in-conference game, then I'll give a couple of the early season non-conference games that are worth watching.
All right, so my second one is Alabama, Texas A&M. This is October 9th in College Station. A lot of the experts are picking A&M as kind of that best challenger in the West to maybe give Bama a game. I'm not sure people are actually picking them to win the West, but they're picking them as kind of that final hurdle or the biggest hurdle that Alabama faces as far as in conference goes. Both teams are breaking in new quarterbacks. A&M does return a lot of players across the board. I'll touch on them more a little later. But this kind of seems to be the big game in the West outside of your typical Bama-Auburn rivalry game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if some of the other teams out West put together a little bit of a better season. We'll talk about some of them here in a little bit, but especially what is able to happen there to give Alabama a little bit of competition. But those are certainly, I think, the highlight of in-season games. 2 out-of-season games that I think are worth watching from the SEC. Both of them come in week 1. The first one is number 5, Georgia versus number 3, Clemson. We talked about this a little bit when we previewed the ACC, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. Go back and listen to that episode if you want that insight. But here's what we're going to say. These are 2 teams that will both be vying and fighting for playoff spots later in the season. Clemson, in my opinion, probably all but certain to have it locked up. But Georgia, very much, I think, is going to be competitive for the SEC title and making the playoffs as well. So what I'm really excited about this is we can be seeing a potential either playoff or national championship rematch all the way in week 1, which is just going to be really exciting if that does happen. If somehow they do play, whether that's in a early playoff game or all the way to the national championship game, to be able to say, let's see how these 2 teams have progressed from week 1 now to when everything is literally on the line. So that's going to be a fun one. Great week 1 game, especially after a terrible week 0 slate of games.
Yeah, it's a huge litmus test for both those teams. Doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Both teams, like you mentioned, will probably be there at the end. But it's going to be fun to kind of gauge where they are early. We'll get to see Clemson as the post-Trevor Lawrence era. And it's not a gimme for his opener. Now, he played a lot last year with Trevor Lawrence injury. But Georgia, they seem to finally, maybe have their ducks in a row to make that run. So they get to kind of
Bulldogs in a row.
Yeah.
You were thinking of Oregon.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I meant. Bulldogs in a row. We'll see how they look. Those early season games are always interesting to knock the rust off. I wonder how much we will truly get from both teams. Do we see a full, you know, gauntlet thrown out, or do we see more vanilla because both teams know, yeah, we'd love to win this game, but it's not really going to affect us at the end of the season unless one of them gets blown out. Even still, I don't think it'll really matter.
No, you're right. I don't think this game has the playoff, stakes in it, but I do think it's going to be really exciting when they get to the end of the season and to say
It
these two teams have played before. Let's see what happens now when they play.
it will be fun to watch.
Yeah, no doubt. Another one coming up in week 1 as well is number 1 Alabama versus number 14 Miami. It's really difficult to say that Alabama ever has to actually rebuild. It seems like they just replenish. But if you were ever going to say that it's a rebuilding year, this is as good of a year, I suppose, as any. They're breaking in a new quarterback. They're breaking in some new receivers. They got some holes in defense that they have to fill. Again, I'm not ultimately worried about what Alabama will be able to put on the field, but put them in week 1 against a ranked Miami team. Some might argue a little over-ranked at number 14, but a pretty solid, well, yeah, I think me too.
I will argue.
But a pretty solid team. And, for once, maybe not for once, I've not looked the history of Alabama's schedule, but I'll probably say this. Probably for the first time in a long time, Alabama is not only starting their season against a ranked opponent, but they're starting their season versus a ranked opponent while they're also breaking in a lot of playmakers. Not just having to replenish, and I'm not dismissing offensive, defensive line guys, but the good thing about a team like Alabama is even if I didn't start on the O-line last year, I probably got a lot of reps there because they had such depth that they can rotate you in a lot. So even if you were not a returning starter, you're probably returning with a lot of playing experience in some of these, non-quote-unquote skill positions. So when you're breaking in the new quarterback, breaking in some new wide receivers, you kind of don't have the chance to go and beat Furman University and fine-tune out your timing in a live ball situation. You got to go against the number 14 team. So kudos to them for putting us and giving us that week 1 matchup.
It'll be fun again. Kind of be fun to see where Bama is, but I don't doubt what Bama has. So
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, that is, I think, all of the games that I wanted to highlight. I think those are all the games that you wanted to highlight as well. So let's jump into what will be another intriguing, everyone on the edge of their seat as they try to figure out who we're going to pick here for our favorites in the conference.
you want to lead off here?
Yeah, and I'll start in the East because that's got a little bit more guesswork in it, I guess. So when I started doing my research for this, I really wanted to try and make a case for Florida to win the East. They won it last year. We've seen them get a little bit better over the course of the year. And I think that even starting a new quarterback, Emory Jones, I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. I think he's going to put up some numbers, and I think he'll make a splash there at quarterback. They also returned 3 starters on their offensive line, so they're going to be able to, slide some protection, make some holes for the running game, all of that stuff. But here's the thing. Then I looked up their schedule. They do not have a very favorable schedule.
They get to play Tennessee.
They do get to play Tennessee, so that's one loss for sure. No, here is their schedule for this year. So they play Florida Atlantic, no problem. They play South Florida, shouldn't be a problem. Then they get to host, but they play Alabama, probably not going to win that game. Then they get Tennessee, Kentucky, Vanderbilt. All right, probably some wins there. I'm not saying they have the toughest schedule in the world, but then they have to go to LSU, and then after that they play Georgia, and then finish off with some less difficult games until they get Florida State at the end of the year, which is always a rivalry game. So again, you might not say that's not the most disastrous schedule, but let me tell you some of the teams that were on there. Alabama was on there. LSU is on there. Of course, they have to play Georgia, and then they play Florida State, who is a rival, and those games can go any which way. So then I thought, well, if it's not going to be Florida, who else is it going to be from the East? And of course, You think Georgia, right? That's the logical choice. And so I thought, okay, who do I think is going to win that matchup, right? Because Florida somehow got there last year. Is it going to be Georgia this year? Let me check Georgia's schedule. All right. They have Clemson, week 1, another great game, but it's non-conference. So this doesn't count for the sake of picking our conference winner. Mm-hmm. So who are their conference games? Well, of course, they got the typical teams in the East that they have to play. But outside of, Florida, nothing's too surprising. So then in the West, what are they playing this year in the West? They play Auburn, good team, but it's no Alabama, and they play Arkansas.
Yeah,
they have a much more
slightly
favorable,
easier than Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. So as much as I think Florida can be competitive, as much as I think that they will vie for the East, I think what it comes down to is not going to be a head-to-head matchup against Florida and Georgia. If that's all it came down to, the winner of that game, I could see Florida beating Georgia. The problem is I think even if that happens, Georgia still gets there with fewer SEC losses and therefore makes it out of the East into the conference championship. So that's a long way to say that I think Georgia gets there, despite maybe not being the best team.
I'm going to agree with you. Oh, well, I'm going to disagree there.
I'm not saying they're not. I think they probably are. I'm just saying despite not having as big of a lead as I think maybe others think they have.
Yeah. So I'm on the Georgia train in the East. So my question is, can Kirby Smart finally break through and take down Nick Saban? I think he gets to Atlanta, so that's kind of the question. Assistants are 0-23 against Nick Saban. So this is Nick Saban's former assistants that have become head coaches and played against him. Only 2 of those games have stayed within 13 points. Both of those were Kirby Smart. So I mentioned all that, we talked about what Bama has to replace. So I think if Kirby's going to pounce, it needs to be this year. So they should hopefully get a full season out of former USC star JT Daniels. He appeared in 4 games last year. And in those 4 games, the Georgia offense averaged 8.3 more points per game than they did before he took over. They have a really nice running back room with Zamir White, who had nearly 800 yards last year. And then James Cook, which is Dalvin Cook's little brother. He only had 303 rushing yards, but he averaged 6.7 yards per carry. So obviously that number should come down with more touches, but the talent is there. They also add LSU transfer Eric Gilbert. They have a very young receiving core, but I think it's a very talented young receiving core. And then if we know one thing about Kirby Smart, it's that he and defensive coordinator Dan Lanning can put out a good defense.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think you're right. I do think that we both will agree, and I don't know if you've said this specifically or not yet, but I think we both agree that Alabama's coming out of Alabama's coming out of the West. Maybe you're not saying that yet.
I'll just roll into the West. So,
all right, go ahead.
So you mentioned Alabama's replacing their starting quarterback. They also lose their top running back and their 2 top receivers from last season. But don't they seem to do that every offseason?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Maybe not quite that many. They also have to replace their offensive coordinator and several key offensive assistants after Texas lured away Steve Sarkisian. But again, I doubt that really matters. They lose those guys all the time.
Saki's one donated $30.
The defense, I think,
Can't wait
should
to
once
see your
again be one of
family
the
grow.
best in all of college football. They've added even more talent through their number 1 ranked recruiting class. They also added former Tennessee star linebacker Henry To'oTo'o to a team that doesn't really need him. I think he's a backup. Mm-hmm. So I think...
Well, that's good because he can't defend the slant anyway, so...
That's true, but if anybody's going to teach you how to defend a slant, it's probably Nick Saban in Alabama.
Yeah, I actually can't wait to see him pick off a Tennessee slant pass for a pick 6. Right. Real quick, let me interrupt you here with a little bit of what... You might be able to hear this, yeah. Saki's one, Jen, thank you so much for the $30 donation towards the adoption fund. No, girl, when you donate $30, you can interrupt with as much noise as you want. Appreciate that so much. Sorry, had to interrupt with that. Okay, go on. You have more to say about Bama?
No, I think Bama's the class of the West.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, I agree. I think that there are some teams that are potentially trying to close the gap. I think you're going to touch on this a little bit later, but I think A&M is putting out a very good team this year. I think that they could be competitive. But just like, kind of taking this from maybe worst of the dominant teams to the best of the dominant teams. But just like we said, Oregon's winning the Pac-12 until they're not, or, Ohio State's winning the Big Ten until they're not, and Clemson and OU, et cetera, et cetera. These teams that just keep winning it year after year after year after year, I'm sorry, they get the benefit of the doubt. The history has proven them wrong. Until someone comes in and takes that trophy away from them, how can we not? Until, maybe if, Nick Saban had retired and all these players are changing hands, we might be willing to open that conversation up a little bit. But when so much is still in place from the core leadership of that team with Nick Saban being there, I think that there's no reason to assume that they won't carry the West. And so I think that leads us into what we think might be the SC matchup, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes.
Yeah, I think you kind of already mentioned your dark horse was Florida. So I'll roll into mine. I have two. I'll start with Texas A&M, who I think has the best chance of any non-Bama team in the West to get to Atlanta. It hurts me to say it, but they do seem to be primed to take that next step. They are breaking a new quarterback in Haynes King, but he is a guy that sat last year, was able to learn the offense. He's a former high four-star recruit, got a lot of talent. We'll see what he does. Obviously, it's different in practice versus the live bullets in the SEC. But the rest of the team has a lot of talent returning around them. They have a potential star at running back in Isaiah Spiller. The offensive line, I think, is kind of a question mark with what they lost, but there's a lot of talent there that if they're able to plug them in the right places, I think that offensive line will be fine. And I think the defense should be good enough to keep them in most of those games to let that offense kind of sneak some wins out.
Okay.
And then my second one, deeper cut here, but I'm going with Ole Miss.
Okay. I almost put them as my sleeper, so let me hear this. Let me hear what you say.
I'm rolling with Lane Kiffin.
Riding the
To
Lane
me,
train.
he seems like the most likely candidate, including Kirby Smart, to take down Saban from the assistant tree.
So hold on. Let me pause you right there. Are you telling me you don't want Saban to remain unbeaten against his assistants until Texas gets in here with Sark?
I think it would be awesome.
Okay.
But I think if anybody's going to do it in the next couple of years, we're both on the fence on when Texas and Oklahoma join the conference, but assuming it is until 2025, I think Kiffin's the best bet to beat him before then.
Yeah.
So to me, he's the best offensive mind in college football. Sorry, Lincoln Riley. He returns a quarterback that will be mentioned in my next segment. The concern with Kiffin has always been, and really the concern with Ole Miss in general, is the defense, right? Lane Kiffin always produces these offenses. They always give up almost as many or more than the points they score. So DJ Durkin and Chris Partridge will be tasked with figuring out how to get this team to improve. From you, they gave up an average of 38.3 points per game last year and 6.7 yards per play. That's not good.
It's not great.
There should be some talent on that side of the ball to work with. Now we just have to wait and see if Durkin can find a way to, not abuse anyone in the process.
Okay. I will say, I disagree with you that Lane Kiffin is the best offensive mind in the country. I think there's a chance
you're
that.
biased.
Well, no, I do think Lincoln Riley gives probably a little bit of a run for his money there, although I could agree to a point that he has more talent to work with. But I would also say that Ryan Day, also a very good offensive mind that,
They're both good. I think,
maybe not better than Kiffin, but I would say that something to watch out for there. I agree. I think that Kiffin will also play against Saban with a little bit of swagger that even some of the other coaches don't. Don't get me wrong. I think every assistant that plays Saban wants to beat him. They want to be the one to hold that. I think they probably all have a group text talking about it. I just, the little bit I know about the Lane train is he probably, he's probably like telling his guys, hey, there's a McDonald's bag full of money back here if I'm the guy that gets it. So I could see him giving a little extra. No, I just see him wanting it, right? I just see him, that personality of going out there and saying, we're going to run trick plays all night if that's what it takes. We're going to do unconventional things. We're going to onside kick it in the first quarter when we're tied 0-0. You know, it's like I could see him really doing crazy things because he doesn't have the same kind of talent and recruiting pool right now that someone like Georgia has, or some of these other assistants that are going to be playing against him. And so, yeah, I think I like that. That's an intriguing little dark horse. I like it.
I just think that, again, I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, it's a dark horse, right? And
Right.
they're not favored. So they have the offensive firepower. If they can stop a nosebleed on the defensive side of the ball, then I think that they could take a big step forward. And they ran a lot of games last year.
Yeah.
So that will lead us into the Heisman contenders section. And I will kick off with Matt Corral, quarterback for
Yeah.
Ole Miss.
Okay.
So last year, he was 231 of 326 for 3,300 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. So that's far too many turnovers last year for them to really be in contention, right? So
Sure.
that's kind of where I am going here, right? If you cut down on that 14 turnovers, if you can get that down to 8, 7, I mean, that's theoretically for a Kiffin offense, double the point, at least not double the points, but that's more points on the board, right? That's 7 drives that could potentially end in points that were picks last year. They lose some weapons, Elijah Moore, namely the top wide receiver from last year. But I'm betting on the arm talent that I've seen out of Matt Corral and the offensive mind of Lane Kiffin to get his guy to New York. So it's going to take a big season in the win-loss column for them to get there. If they go 5-7, 6-6, 7-5, probably not getting that invite. If they can get into that 8-4, 9-3 territory, I don't think he'll win it, but I think he earns the bid.
Okay. Intriguing. Well, I've got to go with, it's not as likely because this is going to be his first year starting, but because of who he is and the team that he plays for, I think you have to have Bryce Young in the
$1 million man.
conversation. I mean, yeah, he's already making $1 million in NIL endorsements alone. I do think, he was, a top 5 recruit, dual system quarterback coming out. So I think he's going to be able to be one of those guys that puts up some of those flashy statistics. I think he's going to be those guys that, finds an open receiver and what was probably going to be a 15-yard completion turns into a 65-yard completion kind of thing. So I think he's going to have some good numbers. And then if he can break off a couple of runs, have some of those highlight plays, and Alabama makes a run for it, no doubt in my mind that someone like Bryce Young, quarterback for Alabama, will be a Heisman contender, if at all relevant in the season.
Yeah, he's a guy that's going to be put in the position to succeed. That offense always produces, and it's going to produce again. There's weapons there. That team's going to win enough games to where he's always going to be in the conversation. They're going to be on national TV for people to watch him. He's got everything going for him to get there, as does my second choice here.
Okay.
JT Daniels, the quarterback for Georgia.
Had him down as well. Great, obvious contender for sure.
So he was 80 of 119 last year for 1,231 yards, 10 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions in only 4 games. So once he was healthy enough to earn that starting job, Georgia's offense improved significantly. I mentioned earlier, 8.3 points per game higher with him under center. So I told you about Matt Corral, all the talent he possesses. But for me, with JT Daniels, it's about the weapons around him. So he's got 2 good running backs that'll keep the defense honest, take some of that load off, where he's not having to throw the ball 60, 70 times a game like you're likely going to see out of Matt Corral. The offensive line is always one of the best in the country. They have a lot of returning starters, and they're a factory there anyways. His receiving core is young, but it's very talented. I mentioned Eric Gilbert coming over from LSU, top tight end. A lot of good young talent in that receiver room. And this is a guy that also has a ton of talent. He was great at USC as a freshman before he got hurt and lost that job. He was great last year in only 4 games. And you mentioned, not that it's an easy schedule because there's really not an easy schedule in the SEC, but it's not the most difficult schedule. He's going to have those primetime games. He gets to make maybe his first Heisman moment in that opener against Clemson.
Yeah, good point. They might not necessarily be playing for, a chance to get to the playoffs at that point, but they're already trying to build those resumes and build a little bit of foundation there. Another interesting note that I had on JT Daniels, not that this is actually relevant to winning it, but a Fun fact that 3 of the last 4 Heisman winners were quarterbacks who transferred to the school in which they won the Heisman Trophy for. So just primes JT Daniel up for it, right? Give it to him at this point.
So yeah, let's just cancel the season.
Crown him now, baby.
I do have one dark horse. I don't know if you have another one that you'd like to mention.
No, go ahead. Give me your dark horse.
Isaiah Spiller, the running back for Texas A&M. I mentioned him earlier.
Yeah.
He ran for 1,036 yards on 188 carries last year, so not eye-popping numbers, only 9 touchdowns. But he's a do-it-all back for an offense that should be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Haynes King is better than Kellen Mond ever was at the quarterback position for A&M. And the A&M like to use Kellen Mond in that run game, especially near the goal line, which probably ate into some of those touchdown numbers.
Yeah.
I've been doing fantasy football drafts. It's things you got to watch for. So I think there's a chance for his rushing numbers to go up, his touchdown numbers to go up, and it's a first-year quarterback, like I mentioned. So you're likely going to take some of that pressure off of him by maybe running the ball a little more than you would like, especially early. And if he gets going early, I think there's a chance that he takes that next step. He has that breakout year, and I mentioned him as a dark horse. It's going to take a very nice season for him to get them into that SEC West championship run there. So, yeah, I'll see what he does. We've mentioned it's hard for running backs to win.
Yeah,
the Heisman lately, but
I feel like it goes in cycles, and throughout the whole kind of preseason, we found and really were able to highlight a couple of very impressive running backs. So maybe this is a year that they kind of pushed their way back into the forefront, but it's also some really impressive quarterbacks playing, including just mentioned in chat Spencer Rattler for Oklahoma, who is, not to say this, I'm taking off the glass the best I can, but anytime I've Googled top Heisman contenders currently trying to look for who I'm going to say, he's
he's the odds-on favorite. I saw today that C.J. Stroud is tied for fourth best option.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just addressing chat a little bit here. We got some good interaction in chat, which gives me away. If you are listening via a podcast or watching the YouTube vlog, thank you for tuning in this manner. But as a reminder, we are live every Monday night on twitch.tv/PassionNick86, so you can engage in the conversation with us. We always love those interesting conversations and dynamics that we pick up there. All right, so we've given our favorites, we've given our big games, we've given some dark horses and some Heisman contenders to watch out for. Now it's the important time of who is going to win this conference. We're breaking down the SEC tonight, and so
give me your pick, man.
Arguably, it's the conference that the playoffs kind of run through. They're they've been so dominant so long, so this is an important one. Mm-hmm. So I have to just rest on kind of what I said for the same reason of picking them to win out of the West, to pick them to win the entire SEC. I know Alabama's got a lot of replacements this year. If there was ever a time to knock them off the throne, this is probably the best shot that any other team is going to have to do that. But whenever I'm going to sit there and say, oh man, Oregon's won it 4 times, how can I not pick them? Or this team's won it 3 times, this team's won. When I said Oklahoma has won 6 in a row Big 12 titles, how can you not pick them? And then I'm looking at Alabama, and it's like, has won 6 national championships over the last 8 years. I'm like, yeah, hard not to pick these guys. Now I know they're not shoe-ins. They've lost SEC championships before. They've not been perfect. But I think that they are the team to look at, and they would be, if I were having to put money on it right now, right, this has got to be the team that I'd put money on to win the SEC.
I'm normally with you. I think you always bet on the incumbent, whenever the incumbent hasn't really given you a reason not to. But I'm going to shock you this week.
Okay.
Give me Georgia over Alabama.
Oh, come on. I thought you were going to say Tennessee.
No, I'm not.
Somehow sneak in there.
Not that insane. I know the records, know the history, but I think Kirby finally gets it done this year at Georgia. And honestly, I think he needs to, or we need to have a discussion about how good Kirby Smart truly is, right? We've given him every benefit of the doubt along the way. I think it's a put up or shut up year, at least in my opinion, for the visor wearing guy down in Athens. The offense for Georgia projects to be better than Alabama to me. Um, Again, not to say Bama. This is not a case where I think Bama's fallen off a cliff, right? I
Right.
think, like you mentioned, if you're gonna pounce, you do it now. So Georgia returns more on their roster and the coaching staff. The defenses should be somewhat comparable, if not maybe a slight edge to Georgia. And they've been close. They've been very close. And it took a Tua miracle
Mm-hmm.
to take them down in the national championship game. It took a Jalen Hurts led comeback to take them down in an SEC championship game. I think the magic wears off. I think Kirby finally gets it done. So I'm calling my shot here.
Okay.
28-21, Georgia upset in the title game.
Wow. That would be an impressive thing to watch. I think most fans of college football would be completely content. I'm a little bit sad that Mill Dog's not in our chat to hear you say that about his.
If he had been here, I would have had to
Bulldogs.
switch that.
No doubt. We would not want to give him that satisfaction.
I hear you, UT Doogie, 1980. I know, I get it. But if there's ever a time to do it, this is the year to do it. And I'm not saying they're going to win the national championship. I think when the time comes for that, I will pick someone other than Georgia. But I think that they have the talent this year to overtake Bama.
Yeah. Well, very good. I think that's a really nice breakdown of the SEC. If you're looking to focus on some teams that have a good shot of making a big splash, I think Georgia, I think Alabama are the two to look at primarily. I think A&M and Florida are the two to look at on the periphery. And then, some might say that one or two of those might be in the dark horses. But as far as true dark horses, I think Ole Miss is a great one to look at to maybe make a little surprise run. What I can't help but notice, Stevie, is that neither one of us had the University of Tennessee as one of our dark horses. Let's get into it a little bit. Let's talk about Tennessee.
Okay, I like it. For those of you who aren't in the Knoxville area, you can go ahead and skip forward toward the end here.
Yeah, just scrub for about 5 minutes if you want.
You don't want to miss this week's Mount Rushmore for sure. But we'll dive into the Tennessee preview. I'm going to lead us off with the Tennessee new head coach, Josh Heupel.
Josh Heupel.
He was hired to take over yet again another coaching search on Rocky Top, and the new AD hired his.
Is this two coaching searches in a row that led to new ADs as well?
Yes,
cool.
It is indeed.
Cool, man.
But the new AD chose Josh Heupel this time. And this is a name you're familiar with. You lead us out.
Yes, let's talk about Joshua Kenneth Heupel. Born March 22nd, 1978.
Here we go.
In the fine state of, not Oklahoma, actually, sadly. Josh Heupel has been coaching, but before that, I got to mention that he was a player eventually for the Oklahoma Sooners. Actually didn't start out his career there. Played for some smaller colleges, dealt with some injuries, including an injury to his ACL, and came back and was picked up by new head coach Bob Stoops to come lead the Oklahoma Sooners, and that worked out well. And so he left his native Utah to come to Oklahoma and was able to lead the Oklahoma Sooners to an undefeated season where they won the national championship over Florida State Seminoles. And after that, he became a graduate assistant for Oklahoma. He was eventually promoted to what was called the co-offensive coordinator. Actually, I said that before that. He was quarterback coach, and when he was quarterback coach, he did coach Heisman winner Sam Bradford. Now, I know Sam Bradford did not make a huge splash in the NFL, as people probably hoped and expected, but he was an amazing college athlete, very intelligent quarterback, and was coached up well, I think, by Josh Heupel. Josh Heupel was eventually the co-offensive coordinator. He was said to be the play caller. Don't know exactly how that worked behind the scenes, but it was always said that he was the one calling the plays. And OU went through a season where their offense was not as productive as it needed to be, especially due to their weak defense. And so it was kind of one of those seasons where his contract wasn't renewed when it was time to renew. So call it a firing, calling it a parting of the ways. I think it left on about as good of terms as it could have. And he kind of stepped away from Oklahoma. He went back to Utah State, where he had some ties and connections from growing up, and served there for a little bit as a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, but then really started making a splash again when he went to coach quarterbacks and be the OC for the Missouri Tigers. Missouri had very productive offenses under Heupel, and that got the attention of UCF. So he was named the head coach of the UCF Knights in 2017, replacing the departing Scott Frost. They bring in an entirely new coaching staff, and Heupel helps to not only keep that momentum that Frost had going, but to the point where they went with a 12-0 record, and eventually made their way to the Fiesta Bowl, where they lost to LSU. And so that's where he stayed for a couple of years. You're going to talk about it, I know, in a little bit, that he started to go downhill a little bit at UCF, and that's when Tennessee came and snagged him in, named as the 27th head coach of the University of Tennessee back in, I think it was January, maybe early February of this year.
Mm-hmm. Did you mention his time at Missouri there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, 2 years as the quarterback and OC, and just how Missouri had a noticeably improved offense during that tenure.
Over 500 yards per game both of those years. Mm-hmm. And 2017, he averaged 7.2 yards per play. That's good for 6th in the FBS. 24th in S&P Plus, which I was looking up what that is. And in a layman's term, it's a tempo and opponent adjusted measure of college football efficiency.
Okay.
So it's another way of looking at an offense than your traditional. At UCF, so he took over for Scott Frost, who took over Nebraska, who we will absolutely talk about in just a minute.
Yep, for sure.
So in 2018, which is his first year as the head coach, they averaged 523 yards per game, 4th in the FBS, 6.9 yards per play, which is good for 11th for S&P Plus. In 2019, had 541.5 yards per game, impressive. 6.9 yards per play, again, 14th in S&P Plus. Then in 2020, we talk about it being a down year, right? They struggled. All he did was average 568 yards per game, 6.6 yards per play, 12th in another ranking that I don't know what it means.
Yeah. Overall records for those years: 2018, 12-1. In 2019, 10-3, and then in 2020, 6-4. For an overall record of 28-8 as a head coach.
Yes, so I'm going to put my orange tinted glasses on here and talk about last year's 6-4 record and why that's a little bit misleading. Okay. So I couldn't find the exact numbers when I was doing my notes, but UCF was not allowed to practice. I don't know if that was a conference or a school decision, but they basically started practicing like 2 weeks before the season started last year. No summer camp, no fall camp. Basically, COVID shut them down, and they were shut down. Once they were able to start practicing, they had 10 players opt out due to COVID. 4, I believe, were projected starters, or at least projected to be in key positions. So COVID really took a toll on that team. But his offense, as I just said, his offense rolled, right? Most of those opt-outs were on the defense side of the ball. Now, he's always struggled there anyways, right? That's always been the knock on Heupel is, can he have a defense that's good enough? And that absolutely follows him to Tennessee. Can he have a defense that's good enough to win in the SEC? And will his offense work in the SEC? A lot of people question that. If you look back at his time at Missouri, he had a guy in Drew Lock throw for almost 4,000 yards and 44 touchdowns. He also had a 1,000-yard rusher in 2017 as the Missouri OC. And it's not like Missouri was a powerhouse. So I think the offense will be fine. Obviously, he's got to get the right players in there to fit his system. But the question mark for me is and will continue to be the defense.
Well, and I think that he is going to have a school to recruit to that is more desirable for top-tier athletes than UCF. Don't get me wrong, there are probably some really good advantages to recruiting at UCF, being there in Florida and whatnot and some of the scenery. But if I'm a true D1 tier athlete, right, I'm probably not going to UCF. I would rather go to, I'd rather go to Tennessee than UCF if both schools are offering me, right? So I think the school that he has to recruit to is going to be better. I think he's going to have recruiters on his staff that are far better than what he had at UCF. And, a lot of people will give it to him, will look at it and saying, well, he won with Scott Frost players and then got worse as he coached. Now, I think you gave a great defense to why at least the 2020 season had a downward trend. And I think that that's a very fair defense. I think that's a very accurate defense. What I would say is, even if it's true that he won more with Scott Frost's caliber of players here at the end, that's closer to the caliber of players that he should be having at Tennessee. And so let's not dismiss the fact that he can coach good talent, which is something that Tennessee has sorely been missing. Butch Jones and other head coaches that Tennessee has brought in amazing recruiting classes, top-tier recruiting classes, and then they completely faltered away. And I know that some of those might have been them taking a shot on some of the guys that maybe were a little bit overhyped in their recruitment, and they didn't pan out as well. But let's not forget that Tennessee, under someone like Butch Jones, left Alvin Kamara sitting on the bench for 90% of his playing career at Tennessee. It was a complete misunderstanding of the talent of being able to coach it and get it on the field and get the playmakers there. And I don't think Josh Heupel is going to have that problem, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
I think you're exactly right. And just kind of to wrap up the Heupel talk, because we're kind of running into the end of our show.
We got to
here.
go quick.
I think you're exactly right. This is a guy that I don't think he's going to star chase like we've seen in the past. I think he's going to identify the guys that will fit his system the best. And, who cares what that star next to his name is, right? If it's 3, if it's 4, if it's 5. If it's 5, great. If it's 3, he doesn't care. He's going to go get the guys that he likes the best. And we'll have to wait and see what that means at Tennessee.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to trust him, at least on the front end.
Not to drag this conversation out too much longer, but again, he was a guy who was initially recruited and was playing game at Weber State University in Utah. Redshirted, saw a little bit of action, had the ACL injury. Then he went to Snow College in Utah.
That's
Powerhouse team, right? And then he rehabs, he starts playing back up. Utah State offers him, but then so does Oklahoma, and he goes to Oklahoma as well. I bring that up simply to say this. You brought up, I think, was a great point. He's not going to chase the stars. Now, I think he can land some high-star guys. I'm not saying that he can't. But what I am saying is I think he will see in other players something that he saw in himself, and that is the star is not everything. And I can take a guy who's got 3 stars as opposed to 5, who's rehabbing an ACL tear and played for a community college, but has the heart to come out here and the coachability to learn this game and the way that we want him to play and to execute the way that we need him to execute, and can go in 12-0 and beat Florida State for a national championship,
Absolutely. I'm going to give you three spots to watch this year, and then we'll get into predictions. So,
yeah, like it.
So I did my notes yesterday, and I said that it starts at the quarterback spot. Heupel has not named a starter. That's changed. He named Jim Milton the starter, who I did say in my notes that was the assumption. It's been the assumption for a couple weeks. This is a guy who has a chance to be a stud. He's not put it together yet. Although, as I talked about a couple weeks ago, I am fully willing to blame Jim Harbaugh for this. Milton climbed as high as number 4 on FanDuel's Heisman odds list prior to the 2020 season. So this is not a no-name guy. This is not a guy that was a bust. This is a guy that, as early as last year, was very highly rated on the, at least on the Heisman odds for a very reputable sports gambling site, right? You can be a reputable gambling site. He had a thumb injury that really derailed his season last year. He had back-to-back games with over 300 passing yards before the injury. He is 6'5", 245. For the record, I'm not saying this is what he will be, but Cam Newton was 6'6", 250 when he was at Auburn. So this is a guy that is built like a freight train. He is a dual threat guy. He runs a 4.6 40, so he's not slow by any means. All of the tools are there for Milton to be a top quarterback in college football. We haven't seen it yet. We saw a glimpse of it, but if somebody's going to get that talent out of him, why not Josh Heupel?
For sure. Like it.
To pair with him, a true sophomore, Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver. He has legit 4.3 speed. He showed it last year. He took the top off of all kinds of defenses, including against Bama, where he had a 48-yard touchdown catch. He came on down the stretch, even with very poor quarterback play last year. The rumor is that Joe Milton can throw the ball 70, 80 yards, so I love the idea of him throwing it and seeing how fast Jalen Hyatt can get under it. And then
Let's
if
just
this
have a
team,
line that can let him throw it 70, 80 yards, you know?
exactly. And then finally, I chose someone in the secondary. I don't know
Okay.
who it will be. I think there's enough talent there, enough experience there to where somebody has got to step up. I think it's going to happen. My best bet is Alante Taylor. He hasn't fully put it together yet. He's got the speed. I've heard a lot about his leadership qualities this offseason. We'll see if he finally is able to put all of that former high 4-star talent into action and take that next step. And if this team is going to be good, it's going to be on that secondary to make some plays to get the ball back in the offensive hands. All right.
Very good. That is our Tennessee kind of focus. But before we get into our Mount Rushmore, which is going to be our top fried chicken sandwiches,
I need your prediction.
Oh, for Tennessee?
Tennessee. Give me your season prediction.
Season prediction? What did I say earlier? I think 7-5 is very realistic. Yeah, I'll say that.
I think 7-5. I think the opportunity is there for them to go 8-4. Things have to break the right way. I'm not willing to bet on everything breaking the right way for Tennessee.
I think there's as equal odds of it going 8-4 as it going 6-6. So I think 7-5 is right where it should be.
Yeah, 7-5. Worth noting, they may not be bowl eligible due to potential sanctions. We don't know how that will play out yet.
All right. Hey, before we get to Mount Rushmore, we got to talk really quick about one game from week 0 because it's worth mentioning. It was a conference game between the Nebraska Cornhuskers and the Illinois Fighting Illini. Neither one of us were super high on Nebraska going into this, but I think we both said during the Big Ten breakdown that Nebraska has to come out and win some games this year, that Scott Frost is probably not on a hot seat going into the season because of his ties to Alabama or to Nebraska and being such a star there. But when you come out and you lose game 1 to Illinois 30-22, and
we talked about Brett Bielema a couple weeks ago. We were high on Brett Bielema.
We said that it was most likely not a good hire. The game probably had passed him by, and yet he comes out and not only comes out, hey, maybe this is it. Okay, read the tweet that Scott Frost sent out, or the statement that he said.
Yeah, so he had his press conference this week. Most coaches do their weekly press conferences on Monday. And I don't know if this was a part of his statement or if somebody asked him this question. But it says Frost on the offense at Illinois. This is from @Steve_Merrick. So Frost on the offense at Illinois. About half of our game plan was out the window when they lined up how they did.
Okay, so this is the thing. But this is why. Maybe old coach there at Illinois had been out of the game so long, head coaching over there in the Big Ten, that he's like bringing out formations from the 1980s, and it really threw Scott Frost for a loop. No, I mean, you can't say that as a coach, right? I mean,
you can. It's not wise.
You probably shouldn't say it in the staff meeting. You probably shouldn't say it to your wife on the drive home. You can maybe think it, but by golly, you don't say it from the podium, right? Nebraska is in some trouble. Now, they should go out and get 2 wins back-to-back because they play Fordham and Buffalo the next 2 weeks.
I'm not writing Buffalo out of that.
Well, if for no other reason than because they're going to be trying to game plan for Oklahoma, which is the following week after that. So they have to travel to Norman. And, I said last week when we were breaking down the Big 12 that that's one of those games that could end up by being wonky since it is the anniversary of the game of the century. But with it being the noon kickoff, I think that'll kind of keep it under control. Boy, after seeing what they did this week, I don't know, maybe I should be more scared because OU has a tendency to lose games they shouldn't. But that should be a game that might see some backups get some playing time.
Yeah, so Scott Frost's contract runs through 2026.
What's his buyout? How much is he about to make?
$20 million if he's let go prior to or on January 1st of next year.
I just want one thing in life. I want one thing in life. I want to be a really bad football coach.
So let's see. They signed him to a 7-year, $35 million deal that ran through 2024. Back on January 1st, 2018, $5 million a year. Despite 9 total wins and the 6-12 Big Ten record in his first 2 years, Frost was given a 2-year extension after the 2019 season. While it didn't include an annual raise, it essentially reset his original deal and altered his buyout structure. So he gets $5 million a year for the first 3 years, plus 2.5 for the years after that. Meaning, if he was fired on December 31st, 2021, he would be owed an astronomical amount of money.
So he's in a win-win scenario. Doesn't matter what he does.
They have painted themselves into a corner. There's some rumblings that they might try to fire him with cause after something happened. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, we'll have to look into it a little bit more, but there's been some issues there behind the scenes, and I'm sure that's because there's probably, if I were betting, I would say that there are a lot of Nebraska boosters that are not Scott Frost guys, and they're in war with the boosters who either played with them or watched him play, and they're loyal to a Frost. So I bet there's this war going on between the guys that say we got to show him loyalty, he's our guy, and those that say he just lost Illinois in the opener, and let's not pretend like this is an unexpected thing because he's not put any.
Nebraska's one of those schools that they fancy themselves still a blue blood, right? They haven't been that relevant in years, but they still fancy themselves that.
Is Nebraska the Tennessee of the Big Ten?
No comment because of our Tennessee listeners.
All right.
Probably. But he is 12-21 there. He has a 3.364 win percentage. So my question to you to wrap this segment up, who gets fired first? Jim Harbaugh, Scott Frost?
Ooh.
The answer could be yes.
Yeah. I'll say Scott Frost if I have to pick between the two.
Yeah, I don't understand Michigan's infatuation with Harbaugh still. It seems that the honeymoon phase is wearing off for Scott Frost. I'm with you. Scott Frost, like you said, he probably survives the next 2 weeks, but I can pretty much bet the house on if they lose to Buffalo, he will not make it out of that stadium.
Yeah. Can you imagine losing to Buffalo and then having to go play OU the next week on their home campus? You're definitely playing for your job if you somehow survive to that point. All right.
Let's do it.
My friends, as we wrap up this evening's show, we are about to turn what could be a 5-minute segment into a 15-minute segment. Because when we start talking about food, we don't shut up. That's right. It is our Mount Rushmore. Tonight we're going to be talking about fried chicken sandwiches. Because it seems like everyone has one now. More and more venues and locations are putting the chicken war continues.
Yeah.
So we got to talk about it.
I think Burger King's doing that now, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Everyone's they're all in it.
So I'll let you lead off.
Okay.
So I'm going to lead off because I got roasted last week when I went second. So I will make you get roasted last this week.
Okay. Cool.
So my number 4 is the Wendy's chicken sandwich.
Okay,
I know I went to Wendy's again.
You just want to get roasted from the start. You're lucky that Face Esquire has been wiped away by the hurricane that changed the flow of the Mississippi River. Otherwise, he'd be in here just wrecking you right now.
First of all, that's nuts that it changed the flow. Nature's weird. Anyway, Wendy's chicken sandwich. I gotta level with you. I haven't had a lot of the non-top 3, as I'm calling them.
Okay.
I'm sure Raising Cane's has one that I haven't had. Burger King is of the devil, so I've sworn it off. I won't ever eat it.
All right.
Had the McChicken as an honorable mention. It's not great. It's there. It's a thing they have. If I'm going to Wendy's, I'm not getting a chicken sandwich. But for argument's sake of needing a 4th,
you put it there.
It's on there. So there's the cliff, right? So now we're jumping way up. So number 3 for me, this may surprise you, Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
I have, if this was grilled sandwich, I would have Chick-fil-A number 1. I'm a grilled chicken club fan. That is my go-to. But the fried sandwich is it's good, but it's not great to me. I'm not a huge pickle fan.
Okay.
So and how Chick-fil-A does it, they soak it in pickle juice before they bread it. Some pickles involved in the make of the breading.
Yep, sure.
And so it's not overpowering. It's still good. I can eat it. But to me, it lacks a little that the other two have. Number
Okay.
2 for me is Popeyes. I tried it last night.
Okay.
It was very good. I will
Mhm.
go get it again.
Let me tell
Now
you. Can I tell you a Popeyes hack?
yes,
Well,
yes. I
first of
was
all,
gonna
did you get
say
spicy or did you get regular?
I got regular.
Good call.
I didn't know. I've talked to my dad about it. He said spicy. They like load it up sometimes, and it's like inedible at
Yeah.
times. So I went regular.
Mhm.
It was just the mayonnaise. I'm guessing that the hack is the blackened ranch on it.
The hack is the blackened ranch on it,
Okay.
baby.
So next time I go, I will try that. My lovely wife brought it home to me as I was doing my notes last night. So I was not picky. I just told
Mhm.
her no
Sure.
pickles on it
Yeah.
and
Sure.
did the
Sure.
thing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's very good. I enjoyed it. I will go get it again. I will try the hack. Um, but for me, number 1, and I tried it again today just to fully compare. Yeah, no,
Okay.
fried sandwiches back to back days, not great for the old heart. But Zaxby's. Zaxby's signature sandwich. They started, I guess, a few months back. I love it. I absolutely love it. It is my favorite. Um, Again, it's probably the sauce that makes it right. So they put Zax sauce on it or spicy Zax sauce. I've had both. The spicy Zax sauce is good. I prefer the regular personally, but you can't go wrong either way. Again, I go no pickle. I know you may be a pickle guy, so by all means, keep the pickles. But Zaxby's to me is the best fried chicken sandwich in the market right now that I've had.
Okay. I like it. I like it. I can approve that list. All right. So let me give you mine.
Okay.
I'm going to say number 4 for me is Raising Cane's chicken sandwich. It would probably be higher, and if I will admit this, if the recipe has changed in about the last 4 years, then my assessment on this could be off. But I think there is a Raising Cane's here in Knoxville, kind of close to campus.
There's
maybe
one downtown, but it's like tied to the university, so it's not open in
Yeah.
the summer. It's weird.
Yeah. So I've never been to that one. So the last time I've had Raising Cane's was whenever I was back in Oklahoma. It's becoming a more popular franchise there. It used to only kind of be around the university, but now they're popping up more and more. So I picked one up, a sandwich when I was out there last time, and it was very good. Last time I had it was before the chicken sandwich war had started. Raising Cane sauce is phenomenal. It's a little bit like Zax sauce in my opinion, at least of what I remember. And so very, very good sandwich. It definitely makes it. It probably would be a little bit higher if I wasn't just having a memory of this sandwich. So that's number 4 for me. Number 3, I will put the Zaxby's sandwich. I think it's a good sandwich, kind of for that same reason the Raising Cane's one. I do like the pickle on it, and one thing that I like about it is that it's not marinated in that pickle juice like the Chick-fil-A one is. So I like the fact that I get some pickle taste, but not too much pickle taste. And for that reason, that's why Chick-fil-A is actually number 2 on my list. Because don't get me wrong, it's probably the classic. But at the
It
same time,
started the war, right? Like
it was the go-to chicken
it's not
sandwich.
even in the war, right? Like it's like the general that is retired now.
Yeah,
and is
it's the George Washington of these chicken sandwiches.
laughing at all the
And if you had to say, Nick, your entire family has to eat dinner tonight, where are you going? And I know that I want a chicken sandwich kind of thing. We're going to Chick-fil-A because it's just a versatile. I say versatile, like it's all chicken. Don't get me wrong, but like, the overall quality of the food.
So was Zaxby's
and the I'll say this too. The reason that Chick-fil-A might don't. Oh, Face is alive. This is fantastic. Jen,
Good,
no, the
good
lines.
to hear from you, Face.
The lines will go like that, Jen. Don't worry about the lines. Just embrace the Chick-fil-A. The reason Chick-fil-A might be able to sneak up to number 1, although it's going to stay number 2 for me, is because of just the consistency. My number 1, let me get there and then I'll make this point. My number 1 is the Popeyes chicken sandwich. It is the best out there. I like the regular one as opposed to the spicy. Now, if they battered it in their spicy batter, I would love that. But they don't. They just put a spicy mayo on it, and I'm not really excited about that. So I do the regular one, but I add the blackened ranch to it. It is the best. The only problem with every one of these, with Raising Cane's, with with Raising Cane's, with Popeyes, with all of them, is that they can be inconsistent, and Chick-fil-A just is never inconsistent. If I order a chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A, it's going to taste the same every single time, and I like that sometimes. You need that
Chick-fil-A also has the added the different sauces that could change it up a little bit.
True.
A little more versatile. I will say, if we expanded this to include biscuits, then Bojangles wins this hands down.
Now, I will agree with that. If
Cajun
this was
filet
a,
biscuit
if
is
this was
the
a
best thing out
simply fried chicken on some kind of bread delivery system, Bojangles would 100% not only make this list, but would smash this list.
Yes,
because
the
the
Cajun
filet,
filet biscuit is just, oh my gosh,
it's next level.
It
I
is.
might have to drive out and get it tomorrow morning for breakfast. Now that we're talking about it,
You can't go wrong.
They serve breakfast all day. Maybe I'll drive there right now. Maybe I'll go do that.
There's one on your way to my house. Bring it over.
True. There is no one. There is no one else that makes an honorable mention for me on this list. Don't get me wrong. I for a long time enjoyed the spicy chicken sandwich anyway from Wendy's, but it does not hold the torch to any of these others.
It's a huge drop off.
I would never order a McChicken. You could not pay me enough money to order a McChicken. The only way I would order a McChicken is if you said, "Hey Nick, all they have is McChicken and McFish and McRib." I guess I would pick a McChicken at that point. Interesting story about that. One time I ordered cheeseburgers, the 2 cheeseburger combo, but I wanted them to add Big Mac sauce to the burgers because I love Big Mac sauce, but I didn't want a Big Mac that day. And they gave me McChickens with Big Mac sauce on them. Took a bite of one. No, it was terrible. Took a bite and had to throw it away. But there's just nowhere else that compares. So
yeah, like I said, if I'd had Raising Cane's, that's probably number 4. I had to pick a 4th, and the only one I could think of was Wendy's.
In fairness, I have not tried it, so it did not make my list, but I've heard really, really good things about the KFC sandwich that just came out. They came out with one that's very similar. So
I will try it. Arby's has good chicken sliders.
I will say, Arby's, if I do have to give one honorable mention, I will give it to Arby's because they have a fried chicken club. And so It's got Swiss cheese on it, it's got some lettuce on it, and it's got some honey mustard on it. I know you're a honey mustard guy.
I am a honey mustard guy.
So it's actually really good. It's got some bacon on it as well. So it's actually, there's been a lot of times where I'm like, I want a chicken sandwich, and I want to stay close to work, and my 2 choices are Arby's and Chick-fil-A, and I'll pick Arby's.
I've never had it, but it makes number 4 for me now. It sounds good.
It's good. All right. Steven, you have anything else we need to talk about today?
No, go try the chicken sandwiches though. It's worth it. Your heart will disapprove, but your stomach will thank you.
Absolutely. And anyone who's dieting out there, Jen in the chat saying she's on Whole30.
Cheat days, right? Cheat days.
Cheat months, Hey, why not?
It's football season. It's
football time in Tennessee. Hey, Tennessee plays Thursday. I'm excited for that game. I know you're going to be there.
It should be fun.
Is it on TV? What am I watching it on? SEC Network?
It is on SEC Network. Give me your prediction for that game. Bowling Green is quite possibly the worst college football team in the history of college football.
I think we're going to see Tennessee take some chances and big plays early to really work out the thing and then pull it in conservatively a little bit later. So I think it probably takes them midway through the first to really get rolling, and I think they'll stay rolling through the half, and then, the second strings can roll, then it'll keep rolling. So I don't know. I predict this to be something like 38, we'll say 10.
Yeah, sounds good. 42-14. Let's do it.
Yeah, like it. All right, this has been the breakdown for the SEC. Real quick before we make our way out, let me remind you to follow us on Twitter at SportsCorner865. You can also find me at PastorNick86 and Steven at StevenMcCoy23. You can also download this podcast on your favorite podcast app. Please give us a like, 5-star review, anything like that. That would be a great way to help us get the word of the podcast out. You can also watch us live on Twitch every Monday. The show starts at 9 o'clock Eastern, twitch.tv/PastorNick86. Let's take this bad boy out. This has been Season 3, Episode 5 of the Sports Corner Podcast, breaking down the SEC and what we expect them to do this college football season. I'm Nick. I've been joined by Steven. We're looking forward to college football, and we'll see you next week.
Go Scott Frost.